Hi, everybody. This is my first attempt at teaching a theory lesson in a course that I'm calling The Language of Music. And it is designed mostly for the members of the Greater Tiverton Community Chorus and the Chorus of East Providence. But if there's somebody else out there listening and you find it useful, welcome. Today's lesson, which is lesson number 1, is called, or that is, it's not called anything, it's called lesson 1, but it is about rhythm and beat and to a lesser extent meter and note values and rests. There are 2 elements that make up the language of music. One is pitch and the other is rhythm. Put those two things together and we can sing what the composer wants us to sing. So in talking about rhythm, which is actually the more important of the 2 elements, we have to start with beat. In the beginning, there was pulse. Pulse would be like your pulse that you can take on your wrist, which is, of course, your heartbeat. We use the word beat a lot when we talk about sounds that we can hear and sounds that we respond to. But a heartbeat, by its definition, a healthy heartbeat, is regular and recurring and steady. And that is true of a beat in music. It is a regular, recurring, steady concept, like bum, 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 bum. If your heart beats like that, you're healthy. If it beats bum, 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 that's not such a healthy heartbeat. Now notice I'm not talking about the speed of the beat, because it can go bump, 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 and still be steady and regular and repeating. So the speed of the beat is irrelevant. Beat is a steady, repeating pulse. Now, those pulses can be fast and they can be slow. They can speed up and slow down if that is a deliberate choice. You will have, if you have looked at your email and received an email from me, you will have some worksheets. One of them looks like this. And it is a list of terms that refer to the speed of the beat. And they are in order of slowest to fastest. I have to tell you that there are almost an infinite number of words that composers use to describe the speed of the beat. But this particular list starts with largo, which says slower than slow, adagio, which is slow, andante, which literally means walking, moderato, which sounds just like it would in English, a brisk walk. Allegro is fast. Vivace is even faster, and presto is extremely fast. You notice all these words are in Italian. The language of music is Italian. The people who first wrote this stuff down, I suppose, were writing in Italian. I don't really know why the language of music, the actual language of music, is Italian, any more than I know why the language of dance is French. I don't know why, but it has to do with history. So we'll say the language of music is Italian, and these words are all Italian. Now, if you want to speed up while you are performing the music, the word is accelerando, sometimes abbreviated ACCEL. Accelerando means to speed up. If you want to slow down gradually while you're performing the music, the word is retard or retardando, usually abbreviated RIT, or rallentando, RAL, RALL. These are both words that mean to slow down gradually. A fermata is a little mark that means to hold the note for a while, and it has to be determined in the musical situation how long that while is. It depends on perhaps the performer, perhaps the conductor. And then there's a mark called a caesura, usually known as railroad tracks, which is just 2 lines, and that just means to stop, come to a full stop, and then start again afterwards. Those are all words that have to do with tempo. There are many more, but those are the ones that are used probably the most. Now we're going to move on to rhythm and how rhythm is notated. How do they write down rhythm? How do they write down how long you're supposed to hold a note? First of all, you have to know what note to hold, but then you have to know how long to hold it. And in American music notation, which is different from English, British English, but in American music notation, we use note symbols and we call them by names that sound like fractions. So on the bottom of this same piece of paper, you will see a chart right here that has the different kinds of notes, starting with a whole note. At the top of the chart is a whole note. That is a circle with no line on it. And that usually means, it does mean that it will fill an entire measure of music, one whole note. You can divide that into two half notes. It works just like mathematics, fractions in mathematics, which I was never very good at, but I think I've got this music thing down pretty good now. So you got a whole note, which is a whole note. Then you've got two half notes fill in the same space of time that a whole note does. And so they are twice as fast as a whole note. Then you can take those same two half notes and divide them each in half, which would result in 4 quarter notes. So a quarter note is twice as fast as a half note, and a half note is twice as fast as a whole note. You could think of it the other way. You could say a half note is twice as long as a quarter note, and a whole note is twice as long as a half note. But remember that the relationship is always 2 to 1. It's either twice as fast or twice as slow, depending on your point of view. So going back to quarter notes, those are the ones that are colored in and have a line next to them, either going up or down, which is called a stem. So they're colored in notes with a stem. Then you can divide those in half, and if you're thinking mathematically, you know that those are called eighth notes, and an eighth note is twice as fast as a quarter note. There are 2 eighth notes in a quarter note, 2 quarter notes in a half note, 2 half notes in a whole note. Eighth notes are usually written with a stem and then a little curved line attached to the stem, which is called a flag. So an eighth note, 1/8 note, is colored in note with a stem that has a flag. Frequently, eighth notes come in pairs or more, 3, 4 eighth notes in a row, and those are usually drawn a little bit neater and cleaner than if you had a whole lot of stems and flags. Instead, you'll have pairs of eighth notes would be 2 colored in notes with stems, and the stems are held together by a horizontal bar. Could be 3/8 notes, could be 4/8 notes, could be 6/8 notes, but they're held together with a horizontal line, which is called a bar. They're barred. But an eighth note, single eighth note, has to have a flag. There are 2 eighth notes in a quarter note, 2 quarter notes in a half note, 2 half notes in a whole note. There is, by the way, such a thing as a double whole note, which is even longer than a whole note. So twice as long as a whole note is a double whole note. That's a circle, not colored in, with 2 double lines on either side of the circle. That's a double whole note. You don't see that very often. Getting back to going faster and faster, what's faster than an eighth note? Well, what do you think? A 16th note, of course. There are 2 16th notes in an eighth note. One 16th note has a colored in note, a stem, and 2 flags. If you have a group of 16th notes, they likewise are, I said barred and I was wrong, they're beamed together. I'm sorry, that was true of eighth notes too, they're beamed together. 16th notes are beamed together, but with a double beam. So you can have 2 16th notes in an eighth note. You can have 4 16th notes in a quarter note. You can have 4 quarter notes in a whole note. It's all math. It's all 2 to 1. It's all relationships. And it's pretty simple and pretty obvious if you just sit down and think about it. If this is new to you and you are not comfortable with it, I really recommend that you sit there with that chart and you look at it for a while and you see the logic behind the names of the notes and how they relate to each other. If you think about it for a while, I'm convinced it will make sense to you. Now, the most beautiful sound in music, according to Mozart, is no sound at all. What he means by that is, don't forget the rests. Rests in music are the indications of silence. So you can have For instance, a whole note. Equivalent to a whole note could be 2 half notes. Another equivalent, however, could be 1 half note and 1 half rest. The half rest takes as much time as a half note. And you could have 2 quarter notes in that same space and 2 quarter rests. And each of those quarter rests is equivalent in time to a quarter note. So you can have a quarter note and a quarter rest. You can have an eighth note and an eighth rest. You can have a 16th note, a 16th rest. By the way, we could go faster to 32nd notes and 64th notes. It's very rare that singers sing those. It's not so uncommon if you're a string player. But they do exist, and they are in exactly the same relationship as everything else, 2 to 1. So the rests, which are written on your chart, are equivalent in time to the notes. Then it becomes a matter of addition. So at the beginning of a piece of music, you will see what's called a meter signature, and I'm going to talk about that on another lesson in more depth. But basically, the top number of a meter signature will tell you how many beats there are in a measure. What's a measure? A measure is a space of time that's been determined by the composer as the sort of unit that he's going to use to write his music so that we can count it and make it make sense to us. There was a time when composers didn't use measures, measure lines, or meter. They didn't think of it, and it must have been much more difficult. But now when we look at written music, we see measures and we see how many beats there are in that measure by looking at these two numbers that are written at the beginning of the music. The top number tells you how many beats you need to count to in every measure. The bottom number tells you what kind of a note gets 1 beat. So for the moment, let's assume that the quarter note is going to get 1 beat. That is not always the case. Please don't run around saying that I told you that quarter notes get 1 beat. They only get 1 beat when there is a 4 on the bottom of the meter signature. But for now, let's just assume that a quarter note gets 1 beat. If a quarter note gets 1 beat, then a half note, which is twice as long as a quarter note, gets 2 beats. And a whole note, which is twice as long as a half note, gets 4 beats. If a quarter note gets 1 beat, then an eighth note, which is twice as fast as a quarter note, a single eighth note only gets a half a beat. A single 16th note only gets a quarter of a beat. You have to string 4 16th notes together to get 1 beat. So if you're counting beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, I just counted a whole note. It lasted ba, that long. If I was going to sing 2 half notes in the same period of time, 2, 3, 4, I would go ba, ba. If I was going to sing 4 quarter notes in that same space of time, I would go ba, 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 ba. If I was going to sing 8 eighth notes in that space of time, I would go ba, 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 ba. And if I was going to sing 16 16th notes in that space of time, I would go ba, 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 ba. Now you can take those notes and those rests and you can string them together in an almost infinite combination such that each measure adds up to the appropriate number of beats. Whatever the number of beats is, the composer has decided, which he wrote at the beginning as the top number. So you can have notes, you can have rests. You can mix them up, you can change them around, and when you do that, when you put together different length notes and different length rests, and you make them add up to the right number of beats in every measure, all of that is called rhythm. So don't mix up the word beat, which is steady and continuous and never changing unless the composer asks it to speed up, like that. But usually stays the same, steady, not very interesting, but absolutely necessary to the integrity of the music. Rhythm, on the other hand, could be ba 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 ba. It could be ba 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 ba, and it would still add up and it would still make sense and we could follow it. Imagine the difference between this. ba 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 ba, and ba 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 ba. The difference is the rhythm. The notes are the same. But when you add rhythm, suddenly a series of notes becomes a melody, a tune, something that you can learn and hang on to. The second piece of paper that I sent to you, which looks like this, is your homework. If you want homework, it's class practice, we're calling it. It is an opportunity for you to look at these lines of music and clap them, or speak them, or dance to them. I don't really care, as long as you look at these notes and try to make them make sense and try to make sure that every measure adds up to the right number of beats. Now, a measure is indicated by a vertical line. The vertical line has no musical value. You don't make any sound or do anything because it's there, but it helps your eye organize a series of notes into relatable, countable periods of time. So you look at each one of these measures and you say, okay, what do I have to count to? Well, the answer is the top number, which in this case is a 4. So, and then you look down here, and I've got this written in a simple way right now so that you know the quarter note gets 1 beat. So this is 4 beats in a measure, the quarter note gets 1 beat, and you have a combination of notes, different kinds, and rests. And you should look at each one of these measures, and they are all accurate in terms of the number of beats in the measure and the number of combination of beats and rests to add up to the right number. Each line is a different meter signature. Each line is different. So you have to look at the beginning of the line to see what am I counting up to and what kind of note equals 1. And they're all different. So this is your homework. And I really recommend for those of you who are weak in rhythm, and that's almost all of us, including me, that we practice by looking at these lines of music and saying, okay, I'm going to speak the first one for you. Bum, 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 bum. Now, if you find that easy, good for you, move on to lesson 2. If you find that challenging and it slows you down and it confuses you and you get frustrated by it, or worse yet, you look at a piece of choral music and ignore it completely, if that's you, this is the kind of thing that really will help. And I really recommend you spend a few minutes on it. Not very many. Okay, so that's our start. That's lesson 1. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll come back for lesson 2. And I'll stay in touch via email. Great to see you all. Bye.